Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really fundamental shift happening in international taxation.
That's right.
We're going straight into BEPS Action 1. It's the OECD's response, really, to the tax challenges thrown up by our ever-evolving digital economy.
A huge topic.
It really is. I
Yeah.
mean, think about it. How do you tax a business that operates everywhere and nowhere in the traditional sense? That's kind of the core of what we're unpacking today.
It's a fascinating area precisely because the digital economy, well, as the OECD highlighted back in 2015, it's so multifaceted.
Right.
It's not just your typical online store anymore. We're talking about the entire infrastructure, the online payment services, app stores, online advertising, cloud computing,
All of it.
participative networked platforms, even high-speed trading. It's just this vast, often borderless space.
Absolutely. And what's driving this incredible expansion? You've got billions of interconnected mobile devices in our pockets.
Everywhere.
And this ever-growing web of the Internet of Things weaving its way into our lives. It's this constant connectivity and data flow that's reshaping how businesses operate and, crucially, how they create value.
And what's really interesting, I think, is how the value chain itself has adapted. Remember when hardware, your phone, your computer, became almost a commodity?
Yeah, seemed like it for a while.
But now, those devices are often strategic tools. Sometimes they're even sold at a loss, used as loss leaders.
To get you into their ecosystem.
Exactly. To build a massive user base for the more profitable digital goods and services that come later. Think of a smart speaker that's relatively cheap but then locks you into subscriptions.
It's a clever inversion of the old models, isn't it?
It really is.
Okay, so the digital economy is this huge, often intangible network.
Mm-hmm.
Businesses can have massive reach without needing physical buildings everywhere. So if the old tax rules relied heavily on, physical presence, what's the fundamental knot that BEPS Action 1 is trying to untangle here?
Well, the central challenge revolves around taxation in what we call market jurisdictions.
Market jurisdictions, okay.
Traditionally, a country could tax a foreign company if that company had a physical presence there, a branch, an office, a factory, what we legally define as a permanent establishment, or PE.
Right, the PE rules.
But the digital economy allows companies to have a significant economic footprint in a market. Lots of users, significant sales, substantial engagement, all without that traditional physical anchor.
So there's a disconnect.
A big disconnect between where the economic activity is really happening, where the users are, and where the tax obligations are traditionally triggered under those old PE rules. The big question becomes, where is the value truly being generated in these digital interactions? And following from that, where should the profits actually be taxed?
So it's a shift.
It's a potential shift, yeah. From taxing just where you physically are to perhaps taxing where you generate value and engage with users. It requires a completely different way of thinking about Nexus, about that link, and how you attribute profits.
So a company could be earning a lot from users in, say, France through their app, but because they don't have a traditional office building there,
Exactly.
they might not be paying significant corporate income tax in France on those earnings. That feels like a core fairness issue in today's economy.
It is, and while Action 1 is really laser-focused on these unique digital challenges, it's important to see it as part of a larger BEPS strategy.
Right, it's not in isolation.
No. The broader BEPS project includes other actions aimed at making sure profits are taxed where the real economic activity occurs. Actions 6 and 7, for instance, also work to strengthen what we call source taxation.
Source taxation, taxing income where it originates.
That's the idea, trying to make sure the country where the economic activity happens gets to tax the resulting income.
Okay, so how do Actions 6 and 7 fit in, briefly?
Well, Action 6 specifically targets what's often called treaty shopping.
Ah, yes, treaty shopping.
This is where companies try to exploit favorable tax treaties between two countries by sort of inserting an artificial intermediary company in a third country, even if they don't do much real business there.
Just to get the treaty benefits.
Precisely. So Action 6 introduces minimum standards for tax treaties to clean and prevent these kinds of setups. It ensures treaties are used for genuine cross-border business, not just pure tax avoidance.
Okay, makes sense. Making sure the benefits go where they're intended. And Action 7.
Action 7 takes aim at companies artificially avoiding having a permanent establishment, that taxable physical presence we keep talking about.
Trying to stay below the radar, tax-wise.
Kind of, yeah. It updates the definition of PE to make it harder to circumvent. For instance, it narrows the exceptions for activities that are considered merely preparatory or auxiliary.
Preparatory or auxiliary, like setting things up.
Right. The idea is that if an activity is actually a core part of a business's profit-generating engine in a country, it shouldn't automatically be exempt from creating a PE just because you label it preparatory or auxiliary.
Can you give us a concrete example? How might Action 7 change things on the ground?
Sure. Let's go back to that online seller of physical goods. Imagine they now operate a really substantial local warehouse in a country. They employ quite a few people whose main job is fulfilling online orders, handling local deliveries.
So integral to the sales process there.
Exactly. Action 7 would likely say that warehouse is a permanent establishment, because those storage and delivery functions aren't just minor support activities. They're integral to their sales operation in that specific market. The OECD actually uses examples like this.
Okay.
It's worth noting, though, that implementation can vary. Some countries might bring in what's called an anti-fragmentation rule.
Anti-fragmentation.
Yeah, it stops businesses from, say, splitting up essential functions among different related entities just to dodge triggering PE status. And they might do that even without changing the specific wording around preparatory or auxiliary.
Right, closing loopholes. Okay, that clarifies how Action 6 and 7 are working to sort of shore up the traditional tax framework. Now let's circle back to Action 1 and the digital economy's really unique challenges. Are there also implications for indirect taxes, things like VAT or GST?
Oh, absolutely. While Action 1's main focus is corporate income tax, the rise of the digital economy has created, well, significant headaches for indirect tax systems, too.
I can imagine.
Think about the sheer volume of cross-border digital transactions we all engage in now. Streaming, software subscriptions, ebooks, online gaming.
Stuff we buy every day.
Exactly. Taxing these under traditional VAT GS2 rules, which often relied on physical points of sale, becomes incredibly complex. The same goes for all those low-value goods bought online from overseas vendors.
Because it's all happening virtually, across borders, often without a clear physical shop front in the buyer's country. It's like trying to, catch smoke with your hands, as you said earlier.
Precisely. The guiding principle for VAT and GST is usually the destination principle.
The destination principle.
The idea that consumption should be taxed in the country where it actually takes place, where the customer is.
Makes sense.
But making that a reality in the digital world requires new approaches. The OECD report outlines several potential models. One key model is vendor collection.
Vendor collection.
Basically, it puts the responsibility on the non-resident seller, the online store, the app developer, to collect and send the VAT or GST to the tax authorities in the buyer's country. Another approach is the intermediary collection model, where maybe a third party involved in the transaction, like a payment processor or an online marketplace platform, takes on the job of collecting the tax.
Okay, but that vendor collection sounds like it could be a real burden, especially for smaller businesses operating internationally.
It definitely could be.
Imagine a tiny app developer somewhere having to figure out and comply with the VAT rules of dozens of different countries where their app gets downloaded.
That's a very valid point, and the OECD acknowledges this potential difficulty. They stress that any vendor collection system would really need to be accompanied by simplified registration and compliance processes, trying to minimize the admin burden.
Streamlining it somehow.
Yeah. And there's also the possibility of a hybrid approach, maybe combining different collection methods and maybe having fallback rules where if the vendor or intermediary doesn't collect the packs, the traditional responsibility might still fall on the final consumer. Although
that sounds hard to enforce for small digital buys.
It often is, yes. Very difficult in practice.
And what about those low-value physical goods people buy online from overseas? Have they traditionally just slipped through the VAT/GST net?
Often, yes. Historically, many countries had VAT/GST exemptions or thresholds for low-value imported goods, partly because the cost of collecting the tax on millions of small packages often outweighed the actual revenue you'd get.
The admin cost was too high.
Exactly, but the explosion of e-commerce has turned this into a pretty significant loophole, and it creates competitive disadvantages for domestic retailers who do have to charge VAT/GST.
Right, it's not a level playing field.
No. And the OECD also points out that transitioning from traditional, often paper-based customs procedures to fully electronic systems for VAT/GST collection, especially when dealing with postal services handling millions of these small packages, is another major logistical challenge. It takes time and significant investment.
It really seems like the tax authorities are constantly playing catch-up with the well, sheer ingenuity and speed of the digital economy.
Yeah.
Is there an ongoing effort to monitor all these changes?
Absolutely. The OECD's 2015 report was really just a snapshot in time, a starting point. They consistently emphasize that the digital economy is a moving target.
It never stands still.
Not at all. So ongoing monitoring and analysis are crucial to understand how these evolving business models and technologies continue to impact tax systems. And because the pace of technological change is so rapid, predicting future disruptions with any certainty is, frankly, almost impossible.
But they must have some idea of the next potential challenge.
Oh, yes. The OECD has flagged several key emerging trends and potential future developments that could create even more complex tax challenges down the line. Things they're keeping a close eye on.
Like what? What kind of things are on the radar?
Well, the continued expansion of the Internet of Things is a big one. This ever-increasing network of connected devices generating and transmitting vast amounts of data. That has huge implications.
Data is the new oil, they say.
In many ways, yes. Then there's the rise and increasing adoption of virtual currencies, including cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. They present novel challenges for tracking transactions, valuing assets for tax purposes.
The whole different world.
Indeed. Advancements in robotics and 3D printing, too. These could fundamentally alter global manufacturing supply chains, maybe even blur the lines between what constitutes goods versus services for tax.
Interesting.
And the growth of the sharing economy, peer-to-peer platforms, collaborative production models. That's creating new forms of income and value exchange that existing tax rules might not fully capture yet.
Right, like Airbnb or Uber income.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Plus, things like increased access to government data and also the growing emphasis on protecting personal data. These also have potential knock-on effects for how businesses operate and how they might be taxed.
Wow. It's almost mind-boggling when you list it all out. How many different facets of the economy are being transformed by digital tech and how all that ripples through to the world of taxation?
It's a massive undertaking.
So if we boil down our deep dive into BPS Action 1 today, it's really about grappling with this fundamental question. How do we fairly and effectively tax economic value creation in a world where digital interactions increasingly just ignore physical borders?
Precisely. While Action 6 and 7 are more about adapting our understanding of physical presence and preventing treaty abuse, reinforcing that principle of taxing income at source, Action 1 is tackling the more foundational issue. How do you even establish tax jurisdiction and allocate profits in this digital landscape where a traditional physical footprint just isn't a reliable indicator of economic activity anymore?
Okay, so here's something to really chew on as we rack up. Given this relentless evolution of the digital economy with things like the Internet of Things becoming ubiquitous, virtual currencies potentially reshaping finance, all the things you mentioned, how might international tax rules need to adapt even further in the coming years? How do we ensure a level playing field and effective tax collection without, inadvertently stifling all the innovation and economic growth that comes with this digital transformation?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question, isn't it?
It really feels like we've only just begun to scratch the surface of aligning our tax systems with the realities of our increasingly digital lives.